Hi everybody, welcome back. I hope you guys are enjoying the last bits of summer. The other day I was looking at the weather report or something and I realized that that was the last day that the sun would be setting after 8 p.m. The days are getting shorter little by little, and while I hate the summer, I hate humidity, I hate the heat, I'm very much a fall winter type of person. I do love having long hours of sunlight to be able to do things, to be able to, I don't know, paint in natural light, to be able to go out and go for walks and it not be dark at like 4:30. So while I am very much looking forward to cooler weather, I am lamenting the shorter days. But today's video is not about sunset times. It is about the fact that August is Women in Translation Month. It is a month where we celebrate works by women that have been translated into English but have originated from other languages. And I am someone who I love to read translated fiction, and I love languages. I love so many things about languages, spoken or otherwise. I just am so enamored and entranced by the power of language. Language isn't just the words you use to communicate. It isn't just how you talk to each other or how you write an email. Language, I feel like, encapsulates so much of how a society thinks, how a society feels, how we relate to one another, how we imagine. It directly shapes the way you experience everything. And I think that if you have only ever spoken one language, it might not really be clear to you just how much your mentality and your life is shaped by the language you speak. And I think it becomes a lot more clearer for people when they are bilingual and they can see the differences in the different languages they speak. For me, when I think about Korean and English, there are just so many differences, not just grammatical structure or the way the alphabet is, the way that language reflects the way that a society thinks about itself and the values that it has. For example, when you think about Korea, Korea is a much more community-based, communal, homogenous kind of society, for better or for worse. And I think one of the ways that that reflects is in the way that you talk about your family. If I were to speak to you about my mom, you see how in English I said my mom? In Korean, I would say our mom. Even though she is only biologically my mother, there is this sense of, again, community, of shared responsibility for each other. And so if you were going to tell me about your grandpa, you would say our grandpa. And that's just the way that we speak about things. We say our nation, like our dad, like our sister. And again, that reflects in everyday things like the way society thinks about our responsibility to each other. And so these are things that can't help but become entrenched in literature. When people are writing in their home languages, in their mother tongues, that's going to imbue the things that they write with these values, with these mindsets. Language is so powerful. There's a reason that colonizers, one of their main tactics is to prohibit indigenous communities from speaking their own languages. The United States did it to Native Americans, Japan did it to Korea, and on and on and on. There is a reason. I would really love at some point to do a video of me recommending books where language has a key role, because I'm just such a language nerd. If I could just sit down and dedicate a big portion of my life to studying languages and learning different languages, I would love that. That would bring me so much joy and fulfillment, but alas, that's not the reality of my life. And so here I am reading translated fiction. Of course, I believe that translation is never going to be perfect. A book translated into English from another language is never going to fully encapsulate the essence and the spirit of the book in the original language, but we do what we can, right? I've complained about this in multiple videos where I say when I read books that have been translated from Korean, I often find that the prose is really dry and it loses a lot of the lyricism that exists in Korean. For some reason, when you translate Korean to English, it just becomes dry. There's a line in Babel by R. Kwong where she says something along the lines of translation is always an act of betrayal, or translation is always a betrayal. And I think that that really is true in a lot of ways. As always, this intro is too long and I'm rambling, but these are just some of the things that are kind of rolling around in my head when I reach for translated fiction, and the things that I try to keep in mind when I am reading a work that has been translated. Today I'm going to go through and talk about some books that I have read that are translated and give my recommendations. And if you have seen some of my other recommendation videos, I usually have a mix of books that I really love and very enthusiastically would recommend. And then I have books that maybe didn't quite hit home for me, but I can see other people enjoying more than I did. And so as I go through the books, I will differentiate and let you know which are the ones that I'm like, I love this book, and which are the ones that I'm like, wasn't quite for me, but you might like it. Then at the end, I will also talk about some books that are translated that I have on my TBR that I'm hoping to get to. And I do have to apologize because throughout the video, I'm going to have a number of books that have been translated from Korean naturally because I'm Korean. It's obviously I'm interested in reading those books. But I think that when you look at recommendation lists of translated fiction, it is quite common for Korean and Japanese to dominate those spaces. And while, of course, I think those books are probably great and should be read, there are so many other books from so many different languages that we could be reading and turning to. So I want to try to make sure I highlight a variety of different languages, but I do apologize because there are a lot of Korean books in this video. Well, let's get to the books. The first book that I'm going to talk about is actually part of a quartet, and I recommend the whole series, and that is none other than My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. My Brilliant Friend is book one of the Neapolitan Quartet, and this series was originally published in Italian. Elena Ferrante also has a number of other books that have been translated. The only other one that I've read that's is not part of this quartet is The Lost Child, and that one was fine. I liked it well enough, but I definitely like the Neapolitan Quartet way more. The Neapolitan Quartet is a deeply and uniquely character-driven story that follows the lives of two friends, Elena and Lila, from the time that they are young girls up until they are old women. So it follows them throughout their lives for multiple decades, and it looks at the complexity of their sometimes loving, sometimes toxic, sometimes codependent, and sometimes very problematic relationship. The story is so unique in that it is character driven in a way that I felt like at the end of the series, I was convinced that these had to be real people. They just felt so real and whole and colorful to me, beyond even what I usually mean when I say these characters felt very well fleshed out. The series looks at their lives, it looks at their relationships, it looks at their ambitions and their regrets, and I think that what is also really cool is that it is a series that is very rooted in place in Naples. While I have never been to Naples, and of course I can't speak to how correct the representation is, I have heard from people who are from Europe say that there is such a tangible quality to the sense of place in these books. Of the four books in this series, My Brilliant Friend follows the two girls when they are quite young. I think they're in like single digits up until they are teenagers, and this one was probably my least favorite of the series. I think I gave this like a 3.75, and the rest of the series is, in my opinion, much stronger. So if you pick up My Brilliant Friend and you're just like, that was all right, I would encourage you to continue reading because I just think it gets so juicy as you go on. But definitely keep in mind that it's a series that's low on plot, so if you are looking for a very plot-driven, exciting adventure type of story, this is not that. The next book that I'm going to talk about, I don't have in person because I borrowed it from a friend, and that is Tender is the Flesh. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but I'm pretty sure this is a relatively short book. I think it was around 200 pages, and it was originally published in Spanish. Tender is the Flesh is a dark dystopian story about a man named Marcos who is living in a society after a weird virus has made all non-human meat poisonous to people. Instead of deciding to go plant-based, the world instead reacts to this meat virus by legitimizing and legalizing and normalizing the consumption of human meat. Entire industries develop and warp around the consumption of human meat, and basically the practices that had been in place for non-human animal meat production and consumption just kind of pivot, they course correct, and now humans are being bred, are being raised, are being slaughtered and sold for meat. These humans are treated like they are different from the humans that aren't eaten. They are called heads, I think. Society really thinks of heads as being less than human. They are othered and made different in a way that it makes it okay and it makes it conscionable to do the things that they do to these people. Marcos, through a series of events, ends up with a female head, and he has to take care of her basically and grapple with his feelings about this society and these practices. This is one of the books that I liked but wouldn't say that I really loved. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. I thought this book was entertaining and it went in directions that I wasn't expecting at places, and it had a really gross premise that is intriguing, I'm sure, for many people. But I guess I would say that I didn't find it particularly thought-provoking. The book highlights some of the very inhumane and brutal elements of the meat industry, and I personally, I have been no meat for more than half of my life. I eat a largely plant-based diet, so I have already been grappling with and educated on and had my hands in the elements of the meat industry that I already know to be very, very disgusting. And I value non-human animals in such a a way that I didn't need humans to be placed in the framework of the meat industry for me to realize how disgusting some of the practices are. I already thought that they were horrible. So I guess that for me, it didn't really strike up any new thoughts. It just reiterated to me things that I already felt to be true. But I still think that this book can be really thought-provoking and entertaining. So I would recommend if you're interested in a dark dystopian story. And again, it's pretty short and quite easy to get through. The next book I'm going to talk about, I cannot find. I have the book physically somewhere, but I can't find it. And that is The Memory Police. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'd lent it out to somebody. This book is also, if I'm not misremembering, relatively short, and this was originally published in Japanese. This is another sort of dystopian sci-fi speculative fiction story, and it takes place on an island that is controlled by this group or force called the Memory Police. Little by little, the Memory Police pick a thing or a concept and they remove that memory from people. So let's say that they say the word chairs. What they do is everyone has to get rid of all of their chairs, and as that happens, people not only lose the physical objects, but they lose the concept of chairs, they lose the idea of chairs and memories they have associated with chairs. So it's very, very strange, and they do this with everything, and they're slowly chipping away at society. The protagonist is a woman who I'm pretty sure remains unnamed throughout the book, and she is trying to basically save someone from the Memory Police while also trying to fight against, in her own way, the things that are happening and trying to grapple with the loss of memory. Now, based on that description, you might think that this is some sort of like Jason Bourne sci-fi, like high octane sort of adventure, and it is not. It is a very quiet and surreal and introspective kind of story that leaves a lot open-ended. There are a lot of things that you're never going to get concrete answers for. So I think that that might frustrate some people, and people might end the book being like, I don't know what the point of this was. But I thought that it was really interesting, and I thought that the fable kind of hazy like quality of the book was one of the things that I really enjoyed, because I think it reflects a lot the things that the characters in the books are feeling based on what's happening with the Memory Police. So I wouldn't recommend this book if you're someone who doesn't like open-ended stories or, like I said, sort of quiet introspective writing. But if those things don't deter you or those things don't sound unappealing to you, then I would recommend this. I liked it. Speaking of quiet and introspective books, the next book I want to talk about is The Pachinko Parlor by Elisa Shua Dusapin. This is a short little novella, and it was originally published in French. This book is about Claire, who is a half Korean woman who goes to Japan to visit her grandparents. Her grandparents are Korean, but they moved to Japan like many years ago, 50 years ago or something like that, and they have since been owning and operating a pachinko parlor. While she's in Japan, Claire begins to tutor a young Japanese girl, and she builds, over the course of the book, a relationship with her, and they start to become very fond of each other. This is another book that is not for you high-octane adrenaline junkies. It is a quiet, introspective, contemplative book that has an undercurrent of deep emotion, but is never really going to lay things out for you. There's a lot of reading between the lines with this book, and it talks about things like identity and language and family that feels like strangers even as you love each other. Also the ideas of homeland and home and returning home. It's subtle and it's sparse, but I do think that it is a book that has a lot to say, and it's one of those books that I feel like is probably going to be a bit polarizing. Like, I think that if you're really going to like this book, you're gonna love this book, and I think that if you aren't gonna jive with this book, then you're gonna think it's boring. Depending on who you are and what you're looking for, I would recommend The Pachinko Parlor. Next, I think I will go through the Korean books that I have on my list, and I will start with a book that I've talked about a couple times on this channel, and that is Almond. This is by Won Pyung-son, and I actually have the English version and the Korean version, and it is a goal of mine to eventually read the whole book in Korean. I love this book. I think that it is such a tender and lovely exploration on things like what it means to make friends, like how to connect with people, how to reach out to people when you feel like you don't know how to relate. And it's funny because I've also mentioned this in a couple videos, but I read this book and I loved it so much, so I bought the book in Korean for my mom so she could read it, and she hated it. She thought it was so boring and pointless, which is, you know, it just speaks to people's tastes and different preferences. But I personally love this book, and it is about a young boy named Yoonjae. Yoonjae was born with a brain condition that affects a small almond-sized part of his brain, and it makes it impossible for him to feel strong emotions or really feel emotions like anger or fear or joy. The book follows Yoonjae over a little bit of his life while he's still a young teenager, and he's trying to figure out how to navigate the world with this condition, how to navigate relationships and interactions, and just like be a part of the world when people look at him a type of way. I think that if you are someone who likes reading about things like that, like connection, like community, about friendships, then I don't know, I thought that it was really heartfelt and really beautiful, so I would definitely recommend you check out Almond. Another book I want to recommend that was translated from Korean is The Hen Who Dreamed She Could Fly. This is by Sun Mi Hwang, and I love this book. It is a very short book. Once again, I feel like I have mostly short books on this list. It is less than 150 pages. It's about 130 pages, and this is a very beloved book in Korea. This is a book that I've seen get compared to books like Charlotte's Web, and it follows a hen named Sprout who escapes from her life as a egg-bearing hen, and she decides that she wants to raise a family. Like, she wants to raise an egg and have a chick and be able to be a mother. It's such a cute and sweet and earnest and tender book, but it is also surprisingly dark at points. The story and the author didn't shy away from showing some of the more brutal aspects of nature, and I wasn't expecting it, but I thought that it was really well done. The book explores things like purpose and identity and sacrifice and motherhood and family and found family. I thought it was wonderful, and I was not expecting it again to be as dark as it was at certain points, but even with that, I think that it was a really poignant little story, and again, it's quite short, so I would recommend this to just about anybody. The edition that I have also has really cute illustrations. Am I going to be able to... I feel like this is going to get blown out in the camera, but they have really cute illustrations throughout the pages. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, I would definitely recommend you try and get a physical copy. So the last book that I'm going to talk about for books translated from Korean is going to be representative of an author and all of her works, or most of her works that I have read, and that is Human Acts by Kang. I would argue that Kang is probably one of the most successful Korean authors in terms of authors who've had their works translated into English and found success in like the American or Western market. He has written books like Human Acts, Greek Lessons, The Vegetarian. The Vegetarian is probably her most famous book. She's also written The White Book, and I'm pretty sure a couple others that I'm failing to remember at this moment. Han Gang is a really interesting author, and she has this incisive and, I don't know, like very precise kind of writing style that still manages to be open-ended in ways. I've read The Vegetarian, I've read The White Book, and I've read Human Acts, and this one is my personal favorite. Human Acts is a story that follows the immediate and lasting aftermath and repercussions of the Gwangju uprisings, which were a series of student-led demonstrations that the military and the government brutally and violently shut down. I love this book. I've talked about it a number of times, and I've said that it is a book that talks about death and about pain and trauma without ever attempting to romanticize or glorify any of those things, even the darkest parts of those experiences. And it has absolutely no intention of trying to force emotion out of you, and yet I think that it is such an emotional story. The Vegetarian, which like I said is probably her most famous story, is a book that is a bizarre time about a woman who stops eating meat. She stops eating meat and starts to undergo a strange transformation mentally and physically and emotionally. It's about having agency over your own life and your choices, and it is a very bizarre read. It's another one where my mom read it and she was like, meh. And to be honest, it's not my favorite book either. I think that I got through it and I understood the intellectual sort of heft of the things that were done in that book, but my personal enjoyment of the story was just kind of middle. But whatever book you decide you want to pick up, if you are interested in literary fiction, if you're interested in sort of strange stories or magical realism, then I suggest you try Hangang, and Human Acts is my personal favorite so far, but you can look through her catalog and decide what may work for you. Next book I want to talk about is a little unique actually, and it is called My Pen is the Wing of a Bird. This book is a collection of short stories by different Afghan women, and it was translated from two languages that are spoken in that region, Pashto and Dari. This book is interesting because it was created and curated and published by a project, what is it called? By Untold, which is a writer development program for writers marginalized by community or conflict. The Untold team worked one-on-one with each author of this book, along with English-speaking literary editors and translators, to realize the potential of their stories for publication. So I think it's a really special project, and And the stories in this book, they cover a range of topics: family, obligation, religion, politics, societal expectations, joy, love. There's a lot of variety in the stories. Like any short story collection, there are stories in here that I loved more than others, but I think that it's a really special project, and I've never read a book that was conceived of or published with a project like this. So I think if you're interested in getting to sample works from a variety of women, a variety of Afghan women, then I would recommend this. And I think that My Pen is the Wing of a Bird is one of the most beautiful book titles I've ever read. So the next two books I want to talk about, I do own, but I've lent them as a friend, so I don't have them physically with me now. The first of those books is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, and this is a book, it's a short novella, and it was originally published in Arabic. Again, I don't have it with me, so I'm not sure, but it's a novella. I'm pretty sure it's less than 200 pages, and it is a book that is short but powerful. It is like a bullet. It packs a punch. The book is split into two parts. The first part of the book follows a real event that happened in history when a group of Israeli soldiers assaulted and murdered a young Bedouin girl in the desert. The second part of the book takes place in modern day Ramallah. This part of the book follows a Palestinian woman whose birthday shares the same day as the day of the event from the first part of the book, and she has an almost obsessive interest in finding out what happened. She decides to travel to the site of that event. I think that this is such an intelligent and sophisticated little novella, and it's one of those books where, again, the writing isn't particularly flowery and over dramatic. It's quite, I think, precise and almost not clinical, because clinical sounds like it'd be dry, but it is a precise type of writing, and it's a type of book that demands that you are paying attention while you are reading it. This is one of my favorite novellas, and it is historical fiction meets literary fiction, and I would recommend for anyone who is interested in anything like history, like the cyclical nature of history. Very powerful, top tier book. The next book, which I also do not have, is I Who Have Never Known Men, and this book was originally published in French. This is another book that I loved, and I can see why other people might not like it, but it is a dystopian story, and it is sparse and brutal and eerie, and it is another one of those books where it feels a bit open-ended with a lot of things. It's not a book that's going to give you a lot of answers, honestly, about anything, but it will certainly raise plenty of questions. The book follows a group of women, 40 women, who are being kept in this underground bunker prison, and they have no recollection of how they got there, why they're there, who put them there, what's going on. They have no information and no memory, but one day they are mysteriously free and they go back to the surface world, and it follows these women as they navigate this new environment, this new world, and kind of try to find a place in all of this after having been kept prisoners for years. It is a book that will leave you with a lot of questions, but also for me a lot of emotions, and I think that if you are someone who enjoys weird dystopian stories and aren't someone who needs a lot of concrete answers or mechanisms or things like that, then you might really enjoy I Who Have Never Known Men. So those are some of the books that I have read and would recommend. Obviously there are more, but I'm trying to keep it short for the video. And now I'm going to go into some of the books that I have on my TBR that I plan to read in the near future that are translated works by women. The first is the most recent winner of the International Booker Prize, Taiwan Travelogue. I'm sure most of you have heard about this book, and I talked about it, I think, in my haul video. But this is a book that reads like nonfiction, but is a fictional story of a Japanese journalist who goes to Taiwan and follows a Taiwanese woman on a food journey. With sumptuous food writing, laugh out loud dialogue, and metafictional twists, this novel was impossible to put down. Taiwan Travelogue pulls off an incredible double act. It succeeds as both a delicious romance and an incisive post-colonial novel. So it's sapphic. I'm sure it has something to say about Japanese colonialism in Taiwan, so it sounds very interesting. I'm sat and I cannot wait to read this one. The next book I think I also talked about in my hauls video, and that is Notes of a Crocodile, and this is translated from Mandarin. This is somewhat of a cult classic, it seems, and it follows a group of queer misfits at a university in Taipei. And I had mentioned that I had no idea what the crocodile is supposed to be, but someone in the comments, or multiple people in the comments, said that the crocodile is a stand-in character that's supposed to represent queerness or queer people or something like that. I hope I'm not messing that up. Illustrating a process of liberation from the strictures of gender through radical self-inquiry, Notes of a Crocodile is a poignant masterpiece of social defiance by a singular voice in contemporary Chinese literature. It's also quite short. This is only 230 pages. I'm hoping I can get to this next month. The next book that I want to talk about, I actually have an arc of, and I admit I kind of forgot that I had that, and so I just haven't read it until now, and it only recently released like yesterday or a couple days ago, and that is A Plagued Sea. This is a horror novella translated from Korean, and it's written by Kim Boyoung, and I just thought that the description of this sounded so interesting, and I haven't read any translated horror that's from Korea, so this will be my first. Visionary Korean author Kim Bo-young unleashes a Lovecraftian nightmare of infection, transformation, and abomination. The story follows a bodyguard named Woo-young, and she is trapped on an island when a giant earthquake unleashes some sort of weird plague virus that changes people who are affected into weird fishy monsters. I think it sounds weird, I think it sounds creepy, and it's only about 100 pages long, so I'm also hoping that I can get to this next month. In what month is it today? In September. I want to read this in September. I mentioned this in my TBR video, but if I do end up going to Morocco, which I guess by the time that this video comes out, I will have decided if I'm going to Morocco or not. But if I am going to Morocco and Lucy is doing well, I will be reading the last chapter. The last chapter was originally published in Arabic, and it is by a Moroccan author. I actually don't know a whole lot about this book, but I know that it is supposed to be a semi-autobiographical story about a Moroccan woman who is navigating a bunch of things like family and society and identity. And I didn't want to look into it too much, so that's all I know. But I'm hoping that if I can go to Morocco, I will be able to read this while I'm there. And the last book I'm going to talk about that is on my TBR that I will hopefully read sooner rather than later. Obviously, I have 100 other books on my TBR that are translated books, but these are the ones that I'm hoping to get to like this year or the next couple months. The last book on that list is Hurricane Season. I've been wanting to read this book for a bit, and I keep just like not getting to it, so I'm hoping that if I put it in this video, it will encourage me to read this book before the year is up. This was originally written in Spanish. When this book opens, a woman who is known as or referred to as the witch is found dead in this village or the small town, and the rest of the book follows the investigations and the things around that murder. In this book's opening scene, a group of boys out in the midday sun come across a rotting corpse in an irrigation canal in the village of La Matosa. It is the body of a woman known as the witch. What follows is a circuitous investigation of the reasons and actions that led to this violent act of femicide, presented from the overlapping perspectives of different characters. Melkor's long, expletive-laden sentences and free, indirect speech provide a vivid impression of each character's tormented thoughts. Each new chapter circles closer to the central crime with escalating horror. This is one of those books that I haven't heard talked about a lot, but the things I have heard have all been excellent. So fingers crossed this is the push that I needed to get to that book this year. And that is it for my list today. As I repeatedly said, there are of course more books that I have read by women that are translated, and there are many, many more books out there that I want to read that are translated works, but I was trying to keep it relatively short for today's video, so these are just the ones that I decided to pick. If you have any recommendations for translated books that I haven't mentioned in this list, please, 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 please leave them in the comments. I am genuinely on the hunt all the time. And if you have read any of these books, obviously definitely let me know what you thought about them. This is for sure not going to be the last video that I have that is centered around language or translated works. I mentioned earlier that I would love to do a video that is about books that have language somehow incorporated into them, and I'm sure in that I could work in some translated books. But for now, that is still a pipe dream, and that is something that I'll work on in the future. So for today, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this video. As always, I appreciate you. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. But I wouldn't, but I would still, but I wouldn't not, but I wouldn't, but I think that this, but I think that